Good morning and welcome to your Financial Empower Hour. This is Jason Cryderman with Great Lakes Investment Advisors. I'm here with my awesome co-host, Mr. Tony Shore, and an even awesomer guest on the show today. Tony, hate to do that to you, but whenever I tell you, Tony, hey, I need some guests on my show, and you and I put our heads together and we think, oh, who can we get that would really be an awesome guest that's very timely based on things that are happening in the market, in the economy, in the world around us. And Tony, you pulled all the stops this time. You're able to get us once again one of the top portfolio management companies in the United States, Gradient Investments. You're able to pull Keith Gangl, portfolio manager from Gradient Investments, and that's awesome. So, Tony, thank you for everything you've done to pull the trigger on that. And Mr. Keith Gangl, thanks so much, man, for being part of the show again today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Love it. So this is going to be a great episode, I think.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good. So, just real quick for our listeners and our viewers, obviously we're going to go, how we usually do, Tony and I and Keith, we'll kind of talk about our personal lives, our family, and college football, pro football, the kids, those good things we always talk about in the first segment. But today's show is going to be awesome. It's super timely. As we record this show on Monday, it's actually Monday, October 13th. And this show will air then on Sunday. So you hear this a few days after we aired. As of the airing of the show, we're still in a government shutdown. That's what we're going to talk about today on the show. So we're going to talk about goods, bads, uglies, the ifs, this, then that's, what about this, some of the things we know, a lot of stuff we don't know. But let's talk today. We're going to get really deep into government shutdowns and how it's impacting us in our personal lives. But before we do that, Tony, how's everything going over there in the great state of Minnesota? How's everything with the family, the wife, the kids, the parents? How's everything been going, man?
Well, it's been going great, but I'm excited about our show today. I just wanted to add that I'm excited to have Keith Gangl here. When you came to me, Jason, and said, Tony, we got to go out and get an A-lister when it comes to finance. Obviously, the first name that came to my mind was Warren Buffett. The second name was Brian Belsky from BMO Bank. I had a couple of names. Buffett and Charles Schwab called their chief strategist.
Those guys were busy today. They were busy today. Couldn't make it, or what?
Then I called Mike Binger. He was busy, and I think if number 5 on the list.
5 is not a bad spot to be, Tony.
On the top five financial minds in the country. And Keith Gangl said, "Oh, for Jason Cryderman, anytime."
Even at number 5.
Even one of the top 5 minds. So,
I appreciate both you guys. You're number 1 and 2 on my list.
Yeah, that's my personal ranking, though. I want everyone to know that. That's not, I don't know if I've seen it in Forbes yet or what, but the Wall Street Journal. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Because they'll probably pick it up from today's show, I'm sure.
That could be.
Oh, yeah. So that excites me. My wife was gone for 10 days. She was on a business trip.
She told us about Africa.
Yeah, she went to Africa, then Dubai, and she's back. Thank God. I mean, Keith, that laundry wasn't going to fold itself.
Yeah, no, that doesn't.
You can only eat so much macaroni and peanut butter and jellies.
Yeah. A cereal and oatmeal and heating up a tortilla with some cheese on it in the microwave. I was a gourmet chef.
It sounds like back to our college days.
Yes, exactly. So really happy she's back. She got back.
How was the trip overall? I know she went to 2 different countries. You mentioned that. How was it overall for traveling, nursing, and recruiting? How did that go? Was it a great trip for her overall and successful?
Yes, it was. The Africa trip was a lot tougher. And of course, it's pretty depressed over there. And it's a little tougher. Dubai as a whole, it's weird, she said, going from Africa, which is an impoverished country, to Dubai, which is probably the richest city in the world. It is crazy. They have a mall over there with a ski slope inside the mall. Yeah. You can go downhill skiing inside the mall. They have the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa, and they light that thing up like crazy. There's 3D lights and everything else. She live streamed me from there, did a live video call with me, and showed me the it is just, it looks, the buildings and the lights there, and it's so clean. she was walking. One of her coworkers was walking ahead of her. A plastic his water bottle fell out onto the ground, and he didn't realize it. And someone came running up out of a cove in a building and picked it up and handed it to him and wrote him a ticket, a fine.
Oh, come on.
It was like $50 US.
Wow.
It is so clean there. There's not one, there are no trash cans outside. They don't sell, there's no pot soda, vendors. It's crazy, but it's just all the cars are high end. The place is spotless and it looks futuristic. They're going to have air taxis, and she got to go to the place where they're showing off the air taxis starting the end of 2026. These will be, and they look like a giant drone with 4 helicopters on top, and then the body, you get in
and away you go.
And away you go. Wow. It's like a futuristic city. If you've ever been, any of our listeners have ever been to Dubai, and I guess she was there for work 5 years ago, 6, and she said in that time it's changed so much. But the Burj Khalifa is crazy. You can go up to the observation deck, which is, I don't know, it's 12 floors below the top is where they are. And it's still the highest, and it towers over all the others. There's 100-story skyscrapers, and this one's way, way above those. It is unbelievable. And it sways when you're up there. And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Jason, it sounds like maybe Tony's going to be moving there pretty soon, the way he's talking about it.
No way.
Sounds like he's getting pretty excited about it. And it sounds like she had an awesome trip. When you mentioned like the water bottle dropping and someone coming out and policing that. Well, I know a lot of cities right here in Michigan, the United States, that could use some of that trash pickup and policing. So if I could send some recruiting over, if Dubai could come teach us how the heck to clean up the cities and do the extra policing like that, a lot of our cities here in the U.S. could certainly use that.
They take it seriously over there, I guess, she said. So that was interesting to hear about. And she went through all of her pictures on the TV last night. That's what we did, is we looked at all the photos from Africa to the elephants and stuff she saw over there to Dubai. So she got a little time. She had about a day or so of personal time in each location, which is nice to do some things. But that Dubai is crazy. I mean, it's just...
that's one place I've never been. Yep, definitely never been.
They have man-made islands going out into the ocean. It's in a desert, but it's along the water, and they make islands with houses on them. And from the air, the islands look like big palm trees, and the leaves each have houses. And then they have islands in the shape of all the continents.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's that place is nuts. So it's in the middle of a desert. It's kind of like Vegas in some ways, except just clean.
A lot cleaner.
So,
sounds like.
How about you, Jason? I know. Should we even mention Michigan and Detroit sports at this point?
Well, it's been rough. It's been rough. So as we record this again on Monday, we're just kind of licking our wounds over the weekend. From obviously took my family down to Michigan State. That's where oldest daughter Lexi goes to school. It was homecoming, which was great. There was all kinds of awesome festivities in the town, and before the game and during the game, Spartans hosted UCLA, which UCLA 2 weeks ago was 0-4, and then they played Penn State and they smoked them. And Penn State was ranked number 7 in the country at the time. So a lot of us were like, whoa, what happened? Is UCLA really that good? Or we thought, well, Penn State probably just came in a little too overconfident, not prepared and ready to play. And UCLA jumped all over them. But after watching the game Saturday against UCLA and my beloved Spartans, UCLA did look pretty darn good. But I got to be honest with you, I'm extremely saddened and disappointed. Our Spartans did not look good at all. They come out right away. The first drive of the game, they scored the first touchdown. And, of course, we were just like, oh, this is going to be great. But after that, it went downhill. We could hardly score a point. We could hardly get a first down. Just really bad on offense, even worse on defense. There's some talk and turmoil now about what's going to happen to John Smith, the coach. If you're on the other side, a U of M fan, wow, they didn't do so well Saturday either. There's some wind out there too about what's going to happen with their coach. And then, last night watching that game against the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs, I saw a lot of different statistics thrown out there. My wife told me about some statistics, but what blows me away is I haven't watched. I mean, I'm 51 years old. I've watched a lot of football. High school, I actually announce high school football games, JV and varsity football games. I've watched a lot of college football. I've watched a lot of pro football. Both of my guests on my one guest, Keith, and then Tony, my co-host. Do you guys ever remember in your lifetime watching a football game, especially against two big teams like the Lions and Chiefs, where one of the teams had 0 penalties, 0 flags, not an offsides, not a holding, nothing, no flags? Do you guys remember in your lifetime?
Never remember.
No,
I'm a huge football fan too.
No, I'm a huge football fan, especially pro ball, and I don't recall ever seeing a game with no holding calls, let alone no calls on a team, period. I mean,
well, like you said, Tony, there's
there's
holding every play.
There's like I truly believe that there's holding every single play of every game. Is somewhere on the field. Somebody's holding someone, especially if the passer, the quarterback has a lot of time. Somebody's holding somewhere, right? After a certain amount of time, somebody's had to have made a mistake and gone against the rules somewhere. But they're not always called. We know this. But for one team to go through a whole game against a really a good competitive team like Detroit and have no penalties, that's unheard of. So I question the officiating of that game. I really do.
Yeah, it was interesting. And did we play perfect? No, but
No.
I think it was the kind of the Mahomes Kelsey show, and just unfortunate. And someone else told me this morning that apparently there's only one team in NFL football that's had so many games with no penalties or 1 to 2 penalties, and it's Kansas City. So, but neither here nor there. It was a rough weekend rough weekend. And then of course our Tigers played on Friday night, had a real great chance to move on to clinch and move on. That game went 14-15 innings. I stayed up and watched every single pitch. It was crazy. It was a great game. But unfortunately, there's a winner and a loser of every game. And this weekend for Michigan sports, between the Tigers and the Spartans and the Wolverines and the Lions, this weekend hurt. It hurt. I'm sure all my viewers and listeners are, whether you're green and white or you're maize and blue, we're all shaking our heads right now. We're all a little disappointed, a little upset. Hard to swallow, but what do? You pick up, you dust off, and you move on. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of changes on offenses and defenses of all three of those teams. Maybe some coaching, staffing changes. But what do? You pick up and you move on. You hopefully they have a good week of practice, and then all three teams come out next week and recover. It'd be great to be recording the show next week and say, hey, we just had 3 really big wins. Michigan State, Michigan, Detroit. It out, so it'd be great to have a discussion next week.
Yeah. On the other hand, Keith and I, we had a really good weekend because we're both huge Vikings fans, and so we had a weekend. No stress, no loss. We went another weekend without a loss with the Vikings. So
no interceptions. No. Oh, there's another team. No flags. Minnesota Vikings didn't have no flags.
Of course, it was, the punchline. It was their bye week, so they didn't.
It was their bye week.
I'll take it.
But hey, you're right. They didn't lose. They didn't have any flags. Hey, life is good right now over there, and it's one of those times where they could use the break. I think teams get in those spots, whether it's injuries or whatever it might be, and so we talked on the show last couple of weeks about the Vikings, and hopefully it was a great bye week for them, and they can come out really strong this week as well.
I hope so as well. Now, hey, we're going to come back and talk about this government shutdown. What's it affecting? As of this recording on Monday, it's still happening. So those of you listen, hopefully it's over by the time you hear this, but we don't know. But first, we're going to give away 10 copies of your book, Jason. I'm just going to give them away. You're going to pay the postage. You're providing the book. It's a great book called Empower Your Retirement, and it's full of great information. The first 10 people to contact your office and request a copy of the book and say they heard about it on the show, It'll get sent to them at no charge. All you have to do is call 989-835-7203. That's 989-835-7203. And we're back with your Financial Empower Hour. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore. I'm here with our host, Jason Cryderman, and our very special guest, Keith Gangl, Senior Portfolio Manager over at Gradient Investments. Senior Portfolio Manager, yeah, Keith Gangl. So, Jason, you have a bunch of questions for Keith today. I'm sure our listeners do as well about the government shutdown, right?
Yeah, good point to make there. If any of our listeners or viewers have any questions for myself, for my co-host, Mr. Tony Shore, or for my guest, Keith Gangl, Portfolio Manager at Grady Investments, please do not be shy to call my office, to get on our website. You can email us directly from there. If there's any questions or concerns or thoughts, comments, whatever it might be, please reach out to us. We're happy to field those calls, and we're happy to get answers to your questions as well. Today's a really timely show. As you mentioned, Tony, when we record the show on Monday the 13th, we are currently in a government shutdown. So we're going to talk to Keith Gangl today. He's a portfolio manager again for Grady Investments. I like to refer to Keith and his team as in the trenches. These are guys that roll up their sleeves, guys and gals. Every day they're in the trenches of what's going on in Wall Street, what's going on in international stocks, bonds, mutual funds, small cap, large cap. How do the tariffs impact the markets? How do interest rates? How do these government shutdowns? Like, what's going on in this economy? Because they're the ones that determine when to buy and sell certain holdings, how much to buy and sell, why to buy and sell. And so they're really, truly in the trenches day in and day out. So I love being able to pick your brain, Keith, you and everybody else on your team. Actually, there's probably some of my viewers and listeners that were I had a large client event last week. We had 150 some clients there. We had Tyler Ellegard, another portfolio manager for Grady Investments, come over and give a wonderful presentation. A lot of his presentation, well, some of it, I guess, talked about this government shutdown as well. So for the listeners and viewers that weren't able to attend that event, to be able to hear that now on the show, this is awesome. This is phenomenal. So let's get right in, Keith. I got a bunch of questions that I've been fielding, and I know we talked about last week when Tyler was at my event. But I really want to talk kind of about this overall government shutdown in broad terms, but also feel free to go as deep as you'd like to. We're going to talk today about the goods, the bads, some of these we don't know, right? So the unknowns. But what are the biggest impacts from this government shutdown overall on our economy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always like to kind of state out the facts, just kind of everybody kind of get them all settled in. Because you hear the word shutdown and everybody kind of freaks out. Like, oh, shutdown, that means a disaster. That means the economy is terrible. That means stock market's bad. You know, I need to basically move my allocations around and pull money out of it. But that's not the case. If you look at history as a guide, we always look at history just to kind of set the table of what we're looking at here. Since 1976, there's been 22 shutdowns. So it's not uncommon. I mean, they don't happen every year, but every few years they happen. And they happen, doesn't matter which party's in charge, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, they just happen. And it's just both sides disagree. And so usually on some budget reconciliation, they decide to shut down the government for a short period of time, and then they reopen. Now, the other couple stats we always like to throw out is, on average, government shutdowns are short. So those 22 shutdowns, on average, they last only 8 days. Again, not bad. The longest one was actually the last one in 2018 and 19. That one, Trump 1.0. That was end of 2018. Government shutdown. I remember that distinctly. And then all of a sudden you had a huge rally actually when this was going on as well, right? Because that was with tariffs with China the first time around. You had the government shutdown. So that one actually lasted 35 days. So put that in perspective. So on average it's 8. Currently we're at 13 days. Now again, even if you're listening to this and we're out of the government shutdown, which could happen any day. It could happen this afternoon. It could be happening next week. These numbers I'm talking about are important to kind of keep in perspective of how you're looking at and how we look at the world when we're investing. So generally speaking, they're short. And the other reason that generally they don't have a big impact on the overall economy or the stock market is A, because they're short, and B, because generally speaking, it's not the whole government shut down either. I'll get into that here in a second. But generally speaking, the employees that are furloughed, when they come back, they get back pay, right? So if you get furloughed for an average of 8 days, you come back, you probably haven't missed even a payment your payment period, right? Because if you
Sure.
get paid,
By the time you get a paycheck, I mean, if you're on biweekly pay or what
exactly.
have you,
If you're on biweekly, you probably even missed a paycheck. So there's no need to go kind of reprioritize, whether I have to pay house, rent, car payment, whatever else. You probably haven't missed one because it's, that 8 days may have fallen in that window. And B, if you did miss it, the government historically has actually given you back pay. So it's like you may have missed your paycheck by 2 or 3 days. You move a few things around, not a whole lot of impact. So just keep that in the back of the mind. Now, this one, again, we're on day 13. It could last. Looks like this one's going to be lasting a little bit longer. One of the other things that, considering here that, the pay period we just talked about, a lot of employees get paid on the 15th, and these federal employees. So that could be a catalyst here on both sides to say, okay, we don't want these employees to actually miss their payment. Let's get together, get a deal done, and happen before the 15th. So I'm kind of hoping next couple of days, so it'll be prior to the recording, that we actually are out of it. Maybe that's one of the catalysts. So again, that's just some of the things to think about. So A, they're short. B, typically the employees get, furloughed, get their back pay. So not a material impact on the economy. Now, if they start dragging out that, 35 days, the last one, the markets are actually up. And that's the other stat that I can throw out there before we get into some more questions is, what do we care as investors? What happens after we come out of the shutdown? If you look at the S&P, the one you're following on average is 12.7%. That's a fantastic return. Because if you look on the average for the last couple of decades, it's anywhere between 8 and 10% for the S&P 500. So if we use history as a guide, history basically tells you, that things are okay even afterwards and actually been above average.
Yeah.
I
wow.
think that's
No,
go ahead, Tony.
ahead.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, I'll go.
Well, I think it's
Hey,
you go, Tony. You go.
Well, Keith, I see what you're saying there. It's interesting that most of them are short. There's been 22. There is that 135 day. And I think we could see some impact. I do feel for the federal workers out there, the ones that are considered essential and are being asked to work, but not getting a check if the 15th hits, which is just a day or two from now. And there is no resolve yet. That'll be tough for some people. Hopefully that won't happen though. Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one term I don't like how they use essential versus non-essential employees. And the other thing I guess that we should state up right up front is if you're on, which a lot of your listeners are, and you people that you do a fantastic job planning for, they're in retirement, they will be getting their Social Security. So that's not on the table. That, this isn't a situation where we have a debt ceiling that they're not going to get Social Security. They are getting their Social Security. So that's a big relief for a lot of people that are looking for that. Now, let's put in the federal employees, essential versus non-essential. So essential employees are still working. That means the military, FFA is still work. You're still getting your mail. Those are all happening. The couple non-essential things that could impact the market, if it keeps on going for a while, are we don't get government data, right? So that's a very, key component for what we as investors, we want to see, jobs, unemployment. We want to see CPI, which is inflation. That helps, basically set the table for the Fed when they make their decisions. So that's something that could come into place. There's no government data. And the other thing that everybody kind of throws out, which is kind of a bummer, is national parks are closed, right? So to Tony's point, there are essential versus non-essential. So the essential employees are working, but they're not getting paid.
Right.
And the military is the big one. I think that's the 15th, the payday. So and just so you know, the number of federal employees that are impacted is relatively small to the overall economy. Again, so it's not, if you're a federal employee, you don't like to hear that, but in the grand scheme of things, the federal employees that have missed a paycheck so far have been 650,000. Just so you know, the U.S. has got about 163 million workers.
Yeah.
So you're talking less than 1% of the people. Now, if we go past the 15th, that number jumps up to 3 million. So again, we're at about 2.5% of people missing their paycheck. And that's kind of why, as difficult as it sounds, why investors generally look through it, because it's a small percentage of people. It's a huge headline, but it's a small percentage of people.
In the past, the market's actually done pretty well during shutdowns.
Yeah, even during shutdowns.
Hasn't really affected the market.
Yeah, and again, that's a little bit, it's on average eight days. So it's like, market can do anything in 8 days. So that number, if you look at those 8 days on average, those 22 periods, I think it was 0.3% of a gain. But again, I kind of discount that. I'm more concerned about what happens the following year, because if you hear the word shutdown, people start thinking recession. Recessions are bad. That's bad for the stock market. I need to call someone. Jason, you're a perfect resource. I mean, all these stats that we talk about all the time and how you keep your clients allocated. You're building your plan for, 1, 3, 5, 10 years plus. You're not looking at what's happening this week. And again, we don't have a crystal ball in here. And again, as some listeners may listen to this, maybe we're actually out of the government shutdown, but it's important to understand the stats around it and how it could impact things. And that's kind of where we're looking at things.
Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just kind of trying to collect my thoughts a lot here. And if I think I want to summarize some of what you said there, Keith, is really shutdown is kind of it gives us a bad taste in our mouth. It's really almost like a timeout, right? I mean, and it's not 100% permanent. This is a hopefully short term. I mean, they average 7-8 days. The longest one's only 35 days historically. So, I mean, it's temporary. It's really just a timeout. And timeouts, like we talk about in football and hockey, that's usually a good thing to call a timeout. Get back on the same page, relax, breathe, collect our thoughts, pull back together and move forward. As you mentioned, the market has done historically pretty darn well during these previous historical shutdowns or timeouts in the government. And it's done fairly well historically after the year after. So those are all really positive things that I think we got to be careful how we look at or think about this government shutdown. Shutdown is really not a bad thing. It's a temporary timeout. Hopefully the impacts of this timeout aren't negative, don't get any worse when we talk about historically. So hopefully we're not looking back in years and saying, wow, 2025, that government shutdown or government timeout was one of the worst on the scale. Hopefully we don't pull the averages down here, but we're going to talk about after this next segment, we're going to talk about some more of the impacts on the overall economy, what it could mean to the investors, short-term and long-term. And then we'll even probably touch on some of this interest rate movement we may or may not see now coming towards the end of the year, depending on if the government is still in timeout.
Yeah. Well, it sounds good. We're going to take a quick moment here to let our listeners know one more time how to get a hold of you and either set up that no charge, no obligation consultation or get a copy of your book called Empower Your Retirement. That's right. Jason wrote a book. It's available on Amazon, but you can get yours at no charge if you set up that no cost, no obligation consultation, or just give the office a call and tell them you heard about it on the show and you want them to send you a copy of the book. That number is 989-835-7203. Again, 989-835-7203. And this is your Financial Empower Hour. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore. We're here with our very special guest, Keith Gangl, Senior Portfolio Manager at Gradient Investments, and our host, Jason Cryderman. Jason, what's the next question for Keith regarding the shutdown?
Well, there's definitely a lot of questions I have, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions that our viewers and listeners have today. So again, if you have any questions for Keith Gangl, Portfolio Manager at Gradient Investments, about this government shutdowns or any of the information we're talking about on the show today, or if you have any questions for Keith or another member of his team at Gradient Investments about anything to do with the stock market or interest rates or AI or your portfolio, don't be shy to give us a call. Let us know, and we can reach right out to Keith or another member of his team. We can get those questions answered for you. Some people say, hey, I don't want my question talked about on the show. That's okay. Other people have said, yes, please use mine as an example. I want to hear it on the show. So give us a call. We'd be happy to help you out if you do have any questions or concerns about today's topics or any other topic or questions you might have. But I think it's cool so far what we've talked about, Keith, and keeping this government shutdown. And to me, that's kind of a bad word. Bad connotation leaves a bad taste in your mouth. I like the timeout. We're in maybe a little government timeout. Government step back, breathe, collect our thoughts, work together, and try to pull out of this thing in a positive, good way, just like any athletic team does out of their timeouts. So let's again, I think rehashing, that usually historically we've only had 7 to 8 days in these shutdowns. We're a little longer that as of right now, longest one being 35 years. Hopefully don't go that long. Historically, markets have performed fairly well during the government shutdowns or timeouts. Historically, markets perform pretty well the year after. So those are all positive signs. But let's talk about, if you could, Keith, being in the trenches and managing individuals' portfolios for families and investors all across the country. Let's talk about, from your perspective, what are everyday investors, what should they be concerned or maybe worried about when they see the headlines, or what should they block out and not worry about? So how can we put maybe the current government shutdown or timeout into perspective when we compare it to past events that didn't derail the long-term market growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's why we set the table of kind of what's happened historically, kind of use it as a guide. Doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen this time around. I mean, so generally speaking, they're short. You get furloughed employees, get their payback. That's why they've had minimal impact on the economy. Now, that being said, I don't want to say, shutdowns have zero impact, because they do. There's something we're watching. We're not making any changes right now, but as they drag on longer, that certainly could impact how we're looking at the stock market and kind of, the bond market as well, and potential moves that we want to make and communicate to you and your clients as well. I don't think we're there yet, but the longer it drags on, that's a possibility that we need to modify something. But again, I think it's all said and done. Trumps generally are the deal. Both sides will come together. They'll kick. What historically happens with politics, they kick the can down the road, right? So it's like, okay, they'll pass this. We'll go into another couple more months, and then we'll have to redo this whole thing all over again. But that being said, there's nothing to change yet. The thing that that's probably have a little bit of concern for me is that when the government shut down, we're not getting government data. And so that's, the Fed policy. So the Fed, is data dependent. So that's one thing, drives investors' expectations. Investors, myself included, generally like to speak, like when the Federal Reserve's cutting interest rates, that puts a tailwind on the overall economy, which puts a tailwind on the stock markets. And if you remember back in September, the Fed, resumed their cutting. They cut 25 basis points. Now the question is what's going to happen going forward, and how they're data dependent, which means they look at government data. And since now that, the government shut down, there is no government data to look at. Like, the first Friday, we've already missed it. I think it was October 3rd. It was a Friday that we were supposed to see the monthly unemployment number come out. But again, since there was a government shutdown, that didn't come out. I have a sneaky suspicion that the Federal Reserve already kind of saw that piece of data, because it was pretty well put together, that it just wasn't official. So that number comes out on Friday. There's no data. So we as investors, and also the Fed, are flying a little bit of blind. What does that mean? Because remember, the Fed's got a dual mandate. They want full employment. So that number on Friday that we didn't see, that could either prove that or disprove the fact that where we are in employment. And the other thing they're looking at is, steady prices, which is measured by inflation. We won't get inflation reports either. So there are two inputs that the Fed uses to make Fed policy are kind of on hiatus right now. So
they're missing. As of today, we don't have that data.
Yeah. So that's going to make things a little bit interesting. Again, if it's a short term, I think we can all look through that. But you start going past a month, I think that's where you can kind of get a little bit, because, if I went back and looked at these 22 kind of shutdowns, there happens at different periods and stuff. Right now, we're kind of in this heightened awareness of what the Fed's doing. So without that data point, we're blind, they're blind. So then markets could get a little bit funky. I think longer term, everything's still fine. The bigger thing coming up here, which we'll just touch on, I don't think we'll go in depth, is earnings season. We're about ready to kick off the company earnings. I think that ultimately drives the stock market. So we'll see how they're reporting, if they have any impacts of the government shutdown. My guess is they probably won't mention that a whole lot, but they'll talk about more on tariffs, how their business is, any kind of implications there. So I think, you got that at play. You got the government shutdowns. There's a lot of balls in the air right now. I still think we're in a good place right now, but the longer the uncertainty plays out with this shutdown, the more concerning it may become.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And you think about it, for any of us, whether it's our home lives, our professional lives, I know me and my business lives, and you guys and your business lives, the government, how do we make decisions? Well, we analyze information. We analyze data. We analyze are there areas of opportunity we should capture? Are there areas of deficiencies we need to fix? And if we don't have the data or information to look at, how do we know where and how much and often and drastic we should make of these changes? And so, personally, if we don't have enough data, generally we don't make a lot of changes, because we don't want to make the wrong changes not knowing the information. Well, that puts investors, it puts portfolio managers, it puts the Fed, it puts a lot of people in a unfortunate position to be able to make these properly informed or properly educated decisions. So what do you think if the government is still shut down when the feds are supposed to have this meeting coming up here in October? Number one, we've heard Tony mentioned, we've heard some chatter out there. The meeting could be delayed, could be postponed. These are all things we don't know. And it could be, but if the feds hold their meeting, but if they don't have the data, what's the reality? They're still going to make that another 0.25% cut, like they said they hinted at that they might make.
Yeah, that could make things a little bit squirrely if all of a sudden Tony and I were talking right before the show that they're now potentially not going to meet at the end of the month, which again it's quite a few weeks away. So that again, with the average length is 8, we're at 13. Now you're talking another 2+ weeks. So
let's hope it's all fixed by then, right? I mean, let's just hope and pray.
So then you don't have to worry about it. So then you get into the situation if that gets canceled or postponed, then investors are kind of like, oh, what's going on here? And just so you know, the probability of there's several different websites you can see with the CME, the website, you can see what the probability of what the investors' expectations are for the next Fed movement. It's for a 25 basis point cut at the end of the month.
Yeah,
I
another
think,
percent.
another 0.25%. So I do think, my gut tells me they have a meeting, even if we're still in a shutdown.
Yeah,
they cut 25 basis points, and then they'll throw a ton of caveats around the guidance going forward for before their next meeting is like, okay, the market's kind of pricing in 25 basis points. The Fed generally doesn't like to disappoint the market's expectations because they're setting those expectations.
Yeah.
So and again, I mean, they could legitimately make the call that they don't have the data, they're data dependent, so they're flying blind that we're going to hold off.
They'll probably still meet, but if they have no data, if the government is still shut down, they don't have job numbers since the last meeting. They haven't gotten new job numbers. They wouldn't have new inflation numbers. There's a lot of data points that they use to make those decisions that they wouldn't have. So that's my only concern, but you're right. I mean, the conventional wisdom is, and they've said there will probably be another rate cut. People are assuming that. So maybe it'll still happen. Hopefully this is moot because the government shutdown will end in enough time to get that data to them.
Yeah. And even, as we as investor portfolio managers, we're looking out 6 months to a year. So even worst case, they don't have a meeting. They said what you just said. I think the market's going to say, well, I think even when you come back to the table, you're going to do 25 basis points, and it's not going to change our expectations.
If not 50, based on
I'm more in I don't like to see a lot of aggressive cutting. That 50 basis points would spook me a little bit, just because that means the economy is maybe slower than expectation. I think the economy is doing fine. It's slowing. It's not gangbusters, but it's still growing very healthy. Anytime
it's still growing.
We're looking at
it's not
companies are doing well, as we've seen in the stock market.
Yeah, and I think that's the next big. I think that's going to be more. If you really ask me what's more important, either this government shutdown, the Fed meeting, or corporate earnings, I'd tell you corporate earnings, and that we will see for the next 3 weeks. So that'll tell us what are the companies seeing in the overall economy. Now, if they come out and say things are just fine, I think people, even if the FOMC doesn't meet, and it gets pushed to the right out a little farther, I think investors are read into earnings because they don't have the government data to read, and they'll say, okay, this I've heard from Bank of America, I've heard from JP Morgan, I heard from that's the banks that start this week reporting earnings, so they're going to set the tone for the market. I think that's more important to how we would change our investment allocations. Talking to you, Jason. And Jason, you do a great job. I mean, this probably even if it dragged past 30 days, you're probably not going to make wholesale changes to you may tweak a little bit on the margin for some of your clients that maybe, the market's been the other thing we haven't talked about, how good the markets have been for the last almost 3 years,
been
right?
Very well. It's not a bad opportunity, whether we're in a shutdown or not, to look at rebalancing and reallocating anyhow.
Yeah. Hey, we have to take one more quick break to let our listeners know that they can get a hold of Jason and his team, set up a no charge, no obligation consultation. I just want to give that number again here, 989-835-7203. That's 989-835-7203. All right, guys, we've just got a few minutes left here. Keith Gangl is here from Gradient Investments, and our host with the most, Jason Cryderman. Guys, great show so far. Anything, Jason, you want to say to wrap up the show today, or anything else for Keith?
Yeah, I think it's been an awesome show. Again, if any of our listeners or viewers have questions or comments, please feel free to call in. We're happy to get those taken care of for you. Real quick, Keith, before I let you go, this is a little off topic. Well, it's timely, but I'm not sure if it's on topic or not with this shutdown. But I've had a couple of my clients ask me over the last few months, why is October known as historically one of the worst months of the market? Or the interest, and I don't know if it has anything to do with the actual markets or economies. And it took me by surprise. I thought, I guess number one, I would have to go back and do my research. Maybe that's not true information at all. So putting you on the spot, being in the trenches, is October generally one of our lower performing months? And if so, why might that be? Or is that not true at all?
Yeah, it's a little true. I mean, the worst month is September, actually. So if we go back to like
September
20, from September is historically the worst, and we just September finished up 3.65% on the S&P 500. So very strong September, which historically that's the worst. Now October is usually the most volatile. So sometimes you get, performance and volatility kind of intermix with people. But you're right, and it's one of the lower performing of the 12 months. I think it's maybe the second or third worst. September. So it is on the bottom. But also seasonality, you got to, so we're talking history. I like to put that in scope of seasonality. Q4, which, that's what we're part of right now, October, November, December, is seasonally the strongest Q, right? So it's like we may get some volatility in October, which I think we've seen already, right? And it's not only just because of the Fed. Then we had, I don't touch on the whole last Friday was Trump and tariffs in China, right? The market sold off 2%. That has nothing to do with the Fed, had nothing to do with interest rates, had nothing to do with shutdown. So those are kind of, different things that can get lobbed into the discussion, right? And then, as with the recording, markets are rebounding nicely because, Trump says that basically they'll have a deal with China. It won't be 100% tariffs or whatever. So there's a lot of things going on. So I think that's contributing to the historical volatility. I think, some of the big parts you're talking about, October's had some massive, had the great, the sell-off, shutdown in, I forget the year of that, but then you had the 1987, the market crash, right? That was in October as well. So that distorts a lot of those averages and volatility just because some of those time periods are so volatile. I mean, you had the great financial crisis. It was basically in October, November, a lot of volatility. And I think that's why there's just generally volatility. There's no other reason for it. And then now we'll be in earnings season, which could contribute some volatility as well.
Sure.
And then I think generally speaking, by the time you get through some of this, volatility, uncertainty, market's been really good up to this point. We'll start getting to November and December, and those are seasonally very strong months.
Yeah. You get a holiday bump, as they call it,
they
right?
do.
Yeah. The Santa Claus rally, right?
Santa Claus rally.
Well, that's perfect. Thanks.
That's real.
That's perfect. I appreciate you answering that. You gave some clarity. You gave a great answer. And so hopefully my viewers and my listeners will take advantage of what they hear today on the show. And again, if there's any questions or concerns you have for myself, a member of my team, for Tony, my co-host, or for Keith or another member of Grady Investments, please don't be shy to reach out. We're here to help.
All right, guys. Great show today. Great topic. And that does it for today's episode of Your Financial Empower Hour with our host, Jason Cryderman.